How we doing, world? Wes Witten here. Neodent Smilecast. Very special conversation I have today. Very thankful to be here in St. Louis, Missouri with my friend, Dr. Fetch.
Thanks for having me. Love being here.
How's it going?
It's going great. Better than when we tried to do this recording about a month ago. No snow on the ground, so it's much better, but still cold.
Yeah, no 14 inches of snow to keep us from our little chat.
I said it's single digits right now, but if you stick around till Tuesday, it's going to be 78. So welcome to St. Louis.
Yes. Yep. It's here and there. It's that time of the year. Another kind of fun fact I found out today, this might be a surprise to you. Do you know today, March the 6th, is National Dentist Day?
Actually, I did not know that. And you would think that somebody in my office, maybe my wife/office manager would have known that and maybe made me a cookie or something. Man, I'm going to have to give her some trouble about that now.
Yeah, I mean, now,
National Dentist Day,
I know,
really.
we get to get together, have a little fun talk about implant dentistry on National Dentist Day.
What a perfect day to do it.
Yes, it sure is.
Yeah.
So for the audience out there, of course, we're talking about implant dentistry. I would like to formally introduce Dr. Fetch. Dr. James Fetch is a native of St. Louis, graduated from Pattonville High School and went on to the University of Missouri for his undergraduate degree. He earned his doctorate of dental medicine from Southern Illinois University School of Dental Medicine. Dr. Fetch has spent his 25 plus years in dentistry aiming to better the patient experience through the use of technology and sedation services. He uses the most advanced intraoral scanners and 3D printing services that allow for the most accurate surgeries and quicker recovery, and specializes in full arch dentistry.
Boy, that sounds really nice. I like to hear that.
That's good, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's good.
Almost like I might have wrote that.
Yeah, so the topic today, because of course we could talk for hours and days on implant dentistry, but the specific topic we would like to talk today is patient expectations.
Love that. Patient expectations it's that one thing that a lot of doctors don't think about until it's too late, when they have a situation with a patient that has gone the wrong direction, and you think to yourself, had I set expectations up front, things would have been much better. So this is a great topic. When we had talked about what topics I'd want to go over, and this is one you'd list, I said, I think this is a great one because it's not talked about enough. I don't think there's anybody teaching it, speaking about it, and handling how we handle these patient expectations, for sure. So.
And there's a lot of different directions with it, right? Because you have a lot of different options in the world of implants on what the treatment is going to be. And then, of course, the perception of what a dental implant is, which, of course, obviously can be defined probably 100 different ways.
Exactly, yeah. And I was kind of saying, I was thinking about this, you really kind of have to split the implants into two different realms. You've got the single implant patient who is coming in and they just need a tooth replaced, right? The expectations for those patients you handle those slightly different than the patient that's in for full arch.
Sure.
And you really do handle them differently because they have different expectations. In the end, it truly is about making sure before you get started with any patient that you've had that conversation. Like, what do they want to get out of this? What is their final goal? And what do they think the process is going to be about? So it's not as much as telling the patient what it is having them ask questions, answer the questions, and lead them into the direction that they need to go. So kind of want to break it up into those two: full arch versus single implant, general dentistry type implant patients.
So for the average patient, if we're starting on the single side, on the single implant case, which I guess that might actually even vary in itself from a anterior to posterior perspective.
Yes.
But what is kind of the average impression that you see often in that patient?
So average impression, that is where it is so crazy as far as what patients think. You have a patient come in and they really don't know what an implant is. Some patients will think it's a tooth. Like somehow you're going to grow a tooth and put it in. Like they've done no research. They have no idea. All the way up to the patients that know what an implant is and they think it's the exact replacement of it and it's going to feel like their natural tooth. They're never going to have to worry about it again. It's going to last them for a lifetime. And in a way, we want our implants to do that, but it's setting that expectation for the patient that, they lost a tooth for a reason. Mm-hmm. And just because I'm putting this metal tooth in, there's still things they have to know and take care of and know that it's not a natural tooth. It's the closest thing we can give a patient to a natural tooth by far, but it's still not a natural tooth. And we need to make sure that we're setting that expectation up front, because if you don't, that end product is not going to be what they expect. And even though it's an expensive treatment, they're not going to be happy. So setting the expectation up front of what they should be looking for is extremely important. So let's talk about the range there. You've got the patient that come in and has done some research. They know they need a single implant. And let's break it up posterior versus anterior tooth. Posterior tooth, they're just something they can chew with, right?
Yeah,
they had a tooth. They know they don't want a bridge. Somebody either... I am the one that educated them on the difference between a bridge and an implant, or they were somewhere else, and they're coming to me for a consult on a single implant in the posterior. They know they need a tooth to chew with. And I'm not just going to stop at that with them and say, okay, so you want to chew again. I'm going to make sure we're going to ask them, so what do you expect out of the implant? We know that you want to replace this tooth, and we don't want to use the teeth on either side, so you're in the right place. An implant's your best option, but what do you know about the implants? Do you know anybody with an implant? Because you'll start, if you ask them those kind of questions, say, oh yeah, my buddy has one, my friend has one. It's amazing the difference in experiences that they've had.
Sure.
I had a patient that said, they expected that it would take a whole year to get their implant because that's what their friend had.
With how many appointments?
Yes, with the number of appointments, the bone graft, maybe the bone graft failed, maybe the implant failed the first time, but in the end, they think that the implant's going to take a full year. So that's why I said expectations is more about asking the questions of the patient. What do they know about an implant? What do they expect out of it? Because for me to just assume that they know, you know what assume means?
That's right.
I know it's going to get in trouble in the end. So for me, it's when they come in, even for a single posterior implant, the first thing I'm going to ask them is, what do you know about implants? Do you know anybody that's had one before? Have you had any experience with them before? Anybody that you know has told you a little bit about it? Because that's going to lead us down a different path. Then from there, I go into the idea of what an implant is, what it isn't, again. I do try to tell them, yes, it's the best thing that we can put in there, but it's still not your natural tooth. We were going to try to give you the most ideal situation that's going to last the longest, but you still have your things that you need to do to take care of it. So we'll go over that with them so they realize that, oh, you still need to brush and floss this thing. Yes. It's amazing how many times a patient will think that once they have this done, that's it. I don't have to do anything else with it. So a lot of it is, again, it's about communication with that patient, just to find out what they're looking for, what they may know about, and then seeing where we can lead with that conversation.
Well, and it's like, the whole thing about bad news travels fastest.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you know about dental implants? And then they tell you a horror story about something they heard from a friend or family member or something.
Very rarely do I have somebody come in and say, oh yeah, my friend had his implant done, and they put it
Everything
in,
was great.
6 weeks later, he had his tooth and he was chewing. We had a steak dinner. You don't get those, right? Right. So it's always the other end of it, which sometimes is good because now their expectations so low compared to what we want for them. So yes, finding those things out is extremely important for sure.
So then from there, do you find that it's generally accepted, or do you find a lot of where does it move in that after that initial conversation?
I think for me, because that's what we do. My practice is focused on implants. We still have general dentistry in the practice, but all I am doing is implants. So way we have things set up, we do a really good job of moving them forward in care. And I think part of that is just because of my team and the systems that we have in place, but setting those expectations and them realizing that what we can do for them will fit what they want, their needs and desires, I think is how we can move them forward easily. For a single posterior implant, it's one thing. Let's talk about, the difference between that and somebody who's coming in for a front tooth.
Right.
Their expectation is they've got a bad tooth, they want it replaced, and they want it replaced immediately. There is no, you mean you want me to wait 6 weeks? So that's where there's the difference between these patients of setting the expectation. If you want this right, there are certain steps that we may take with an anterior implant versus a posterior implant.
Sure.
So I think those are the two differences between single implants for the anterior and single implants for the posterior.
Yeah, it's function and aesthetics, basically, right?
Because they don't really care about the function of an anterior tooth, which is crazy,
right?
Because cosmetics really does dictate your function anyways, or vice versa. If we get functionality out of a front tooth, it should cosmetically look well. And the posterior, they don't care. They just want to be able to chew something. And those are different expectations to handle. They really are. And as long as you kind of work with the patient, again, back to that, knowing your patient. They're there for an implant on number 9. They've had an implant in number 30. It's a completely different experience for those patients. And it, without asking those questions up front and knowing that's where they're at, you're going to get yourself in trouble if you're not communicating those
Well, and
things.
especially, when you get into the aesthetic case, expectations completely change because it's like, okay, great. I've got a posterior tooth. I can go eat my steak and I'm good to go.
Absolutely.
Anterior, probably a little bit, sensitivity is a lot higher.
Absolutely. And again, those patients are, I don't want to say a little bit more demanding, but anybody, when you're talking cosmetics, is going to be more demanding. They just want to make sure that this is my front tooth. I want it to look right, and I want it to be done quickly. And it's kind of managing those two expectations. That's the hardest thing for sure. So,
Where do you find, in through that experience with that patient? I mean, how do you level set that from where you are trying to get them,
again, I
that
think
conversation?
the biggest thing is asking the questions to find out where they are, what they're looking for, and then once we do, kind of then turning the conversation back to what they should expect. Because if you're up front with the patient and you have that conversation with them, I think it makes it easier. Go over as dentists, we never want to talk about the things that can go wrong, and we don't want to talk about bad things because then you won't get them to move forward. Here's all the things that can happen with an anterior cosmetic implant, or it doesn't matter, anterior, posterior. You want to talk about them, but especially with a patient with expectations, you want to at least have an idea for them of, hey, there are times when we may have to do a secondary graft here. There may be a second surgery, because if you're not having those conversations up front, when you have to go in because
They
there
think
is
it's
something,
a certain number of appointments, and that's that.
absolutely, you want to kind of overestimate, and then when you get it done in fewer appointments or with less procedures needing, you look like a hero versus the opposite
Right, setting
end
up
of that
for
spectrum.
disappointment. Right.
Yeah, so you want to set the expectations to the fact of, we're going to get this done, but here's the realistic way to get through it. So, and I think, again, with that is how do we do that? One, communication, talking with the patient, asking questions and explaining. Then from there, I think having good models and good things for them to see, before and after pictures
Right.
for patients. Those are great for patients to kind of help set some of those expectations of what to expect when
And
they're
what
being treated.
an implant actually is.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I don't know how many times I've had a patient say, what is this thing sticking out of my gums, when we have them in a healing cap, right? Well, we explained it. There's a healing period where we're not going to put the tooth on. We're going to let this implant integrate, but we've got this healing cap so we can get back in under the gums. They have no idea. And so they're walking around saying that this thing drives my tongue nuts. Like, it's temporarily. So going through those things up front with the patient, extremely important, so that they know the steps for sure.
So for the listening audience out there and the clinicians that are maybe placing implants and doing the quote unquote easy cases in the posterior, now starting to get into some more of those anterior cases, any advice you'd give them on what to avoid, and maybe in those situations, maybe in things to say to a potential patient, or obstacles that might be in the way?
I think the hardest implant to do is the immediate, say, number 9, root canal post-core crown. The crown fractures off. We know we have to extract it. That patient went from having probably a beautiful looking tooth. More often than not, maybe it's not perfect looking, but it looks decent. Crowns typically do. And now here you are telling them that we're going to take that tooth out, we're going to place an implant. We're going to eventually make it look ideal. That's probably the hardest thing to set that expectation for that patient. You need to make sure that they realize that there is going to be a healing period. I still believe at times we can do immediate placement, and we'll do immediate placement with immediate provisional as much as we can, but setting the expectation for that patient that they cannot chew at this tooth at all. And I'll be honest with you, I just don't do it for males, because males don't listen to anything and they're going to go chew anything they want. I can do it with females. And I'm just being honest that I typically tell my males we're going to put into some sort of a provisional, a bonded cantilever bridge, a Maryland bridge of some sort, a flipper possibly.
What's your go-to on an anterior immediate provisional?
As far as, I would love if we get, again, females, good occlusion, I'm going to go ahead and put them into a provisional crown. We're going to do a print-in crown and cement it onto a tie base and leave it in there. Let it heal perfectly. That's my perfect ideal situation. That's my ideal go-to. If I can't get that, because I am worried about this patient's occlusion, I like to do custom healing abutments. We use custom abutments for those just because I can build that tissue up around that so much easier.
Sure.
And then put them into, I like Maryland bridges of some sort. If you can, because nowadays we can print such thin wings that we can typically get a Maryland bridge that we can bond in. And I can print them
it's not too aggravating for the patient.
$1.50. I print 4 of them, and every time they come in, I just pop one off, and if I need to put it back on, I just glue another one back on. So
really
second would be a Maryland bridge / restoration with a custom healing abutment.
Yeah. Okay. Any other expectations we need to cover on the single side before we dive into the world of full arch?
How to take care of them. Again, I really think going over post-surgery, post-crown care on an implant is important. Patients just think it's a natural tooth. Making sure they know how to floss it and take care of it because it is different. We joke about as Neodent, and people call it the lollipop on a stick. I still think it's the best restoration you can do for a single implant, but it looks a little odd on an x-ray, but that also means flossing it is different. So explaining them how to floss it because they do need to take care of it. Yeah. So making sure you set those expectations, again, for the patient of surgery expectations, post-surgery care for this implant as well. So, yeah, I think that's the only other thing, making sure that you are going over those things with your patients, for sure. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, good deal. Well, let's shift gears now.
This is a big shift.
Moving in from singles to full arch. Obviously, considerations completely different. I would think patient expectations completely different. We have life-changing procedures versus, hey, Absolutely. I would love to chew better, or I'd like my premolar to look a little bit better in a photo. Now this is completely life-changing.
You really do have to separate the two apart, from single implants to the full arch. There's no way around it. The full arch patient is just a different patient. They are a different breed. Setting aside patient expectations, for doctors that are wanting to get into the full arch realm, and everybody wants to do it, and they always want these patients to come in and think that, one, they can afford it and they're going to be great patients and we're going to change their lives. The number one thing to think about is these patients, for the most part, they're coming from a different part of life. They're dental cripples, right? And we need to change their lives in a healthy way. And sometimes we need to work through getting them to move forward just for so many different reasons.
Sure.
Financial, mental, anxiety, all the things that come in with it. So just keep in mind, these patients are different. So when I'm talking about expectations for these patients, you have to look at them completely differently. What I mean by that is, you have a patient who comes in to see you, and by the time somebody needs full arch, rarely do they come in with 28 teeth that are functioning. Right. They're not a full arch candidate if that's where they're at. So these are patients that have been living for years with missing teeth, broken teeth, periodontal disease, no teeth, dentures. They're looking for help.
And it's not just that, it's like versus the initial conversation you have with the singles, like, what do you know about implants? Like, they've probably done extensive research and homework.
You would think they would, right? You really would think they would. And I would say 50-50. I would say 50% of my patients have done research on me, not full arch.
Procedure.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing. They've seen an ad, they've seen my TV commercial, they've seen some of the things I've done, they've talked to somebody else, so they've researched me, but they really don't know. Yeah, but they still don't really know what full arch, all on X dentistry is.
Sure.
That's what's amazing. And now sometimes they will, because they've been to another office, they've been to Clear Choice, they've been to somewhere else, and they know a little bit. But it's still amazing how little they understand about implants.
They just know the before picture they saw and the after picture they saw. That's what they know.
Yes, that's exactly it. So for those patients, it's still the same idea as finding out, what do they know, where are they at, and where are they looking to be, right? What is their final goal? Because these patients, it is amazing that they'll come in a dental cripple position, with teeth that are in really bad condition, but they will come in sometimes with a picture of them from high school, a picture of them from college, a wedding picture, a picture of Julia Roberts or the next model, and say, this is what I want. And you sometimes have to say to them, that's great, and I want to give you functioning teeth, but it's 75. you don't have the same facial architecture as you did when you were 18. And
Sure.
I get this almost every day, that when we come in and we talk about what you want your teeth to look like, patients will pull up a picture on their phone and like, this was me from high school graduation, or this is my wedding picture. I want this. And so if you say, I can do that, you have now set this expectation that this patient thinks they're going to look in this mirror and they're going to see the 22-year-old them.
Right.
No matter what the shape or shade of those teeth are, it's not the 22-year-old them. So we're really good about resetting those expectations for patients, that we want to get them phonetically functioning teeth that cosmetically work for them, and that's the combination there. We get a lot of patients that, they come in, they show these teeth, again, when they're 22 years old, their lips are in a different position. They may have showed more teeth before. Now they don't show as much teeth because they've worn them down. We try to build them back up to that same position, and it's not right. It's not going to function properly for them. So they are just a completely different set of expectations. And their expectations, whereas a single implant, kind of go back to the differences here of them. A single implant, if you have a single implant and they're like, it doesn't meet their expectations, they just complain about the fact that they get food stuck in between the tooth. And you didn't tell me that there's a space here, right? Full arch patients can be extremely demanding. They'll come in and want, as I said, they've had broken teeth.
In the beginning is what you're saying.
Yes, in the beginning, right after surgery. They came in and they had 7 teeth in their head, and they all had decay, and they were broken. And I give them 28 beautiful looking teeth on 6 upper, 6 lower implants. And they'll come in and say, this one tooth here, this one to the side here, I really think it needs to twist a little bit this way, and you should see the expectations change in their head. And this is from before surgery, when we've talked about it, what to expect. Now that they see it, their expectations can sometimes change dramatically. Again, right? Absolutely. And that's difficult. So making sure up front. So, how do you handle those? Patience and making sure you have good pre-surgery records. So when it comes to, again, single implant, there's not a lot to talk about. You talk about it's a single implant, it's replacing the tooth. We're going to talk about flossing. It's different. You got to brush and floss, right? With our full arch patients, we will set an expectation of showing them some different options of how the smiles can look, how it can function, shades of the teeth, how they should look and function. And then I'm really good about going over with them before surgery of phonetically how we want them to speak. Again, these patients have learned to speak with no teeth sometimes, or with dentures, or with 4 teeth. So 2 here, 2 there. I jokingly call them summer teeth. Some are here, some are there. And now we're giving them a normal set of teeth, so that changes their speech.
Well, they probably aren't thinking about that either.
Absolutely not.
Right? They're more thinking about, like, I want to look like this. It's more kind of an aesthetic expectation.
Yes.
But then when you bring up the phonetic aspect, it's kind of like, well, wait a second. I didn't think about how I speak today versus how I might need to retrain myself a little bit.
It's difficult for them. It really is. And again, those patients, they've been mentally dealing with a disability for so long. And we'll call it a disability. It is. If somebody's to that point, they are disabled of some way in their oral health. Mm-hmm. And to get them back to optional ideal isn't as easy as we might think. And as long as you've kind of walked through those steps with the patient and you've talked through it all, it will work out. It will, but it's you have to be upfront with those patients from the very beginning of what the reality is and what to expect as well.
Right. So then taking them from that pre-surgery and then post-surgery and then kind of handling that part, because a lot of times if you haven't met that expectation, then they start to understand, okay, maybe this is headed a little bit of a different direction versus ones that are just happy to be upgraded, so to speak. I mean, what are you seeing in the split there of kind of where the patient's head is at that
sometimes
point?
You can sometimes gauge during your record, or we call intake of the patient, of going through the questions and what they expect of, will this patient be one of those ones that's going to be hard to get reality of the expectation to set in? We sometimes see it. And sometimes it's a complete surprise. Like, you would have not expected that patient to have some of the troubles coming to terms with the teeth that they are. And it's just how to handle each one of them. And I'll be honest, in our office, we have a really good, I always say we have a good flow. I really think we have our workflows down as far as how to handle these patients. But sometimes it's the person that's seeing them, right? Some patients accept it better from me. Sometimes they accept it better from my dental assistants when we're talking about these things, because sometimes they'll separate me as the surgeon, and sometimes my team members as the cosmetic prosthodontist. Even though I'm still the one in there, I think because I do the surgery, sometimes they'll turn to them and like, so what do you think, right? And this is an important thing for my team to know, to be on the same page with me, because they sometimes will, depending on the patient, they'll move or gravitate towards one of my team members as their guide through this. And that's okay. And that's what you kind of need.
The non-doctor
opinion. Yes. Because sometimes the things I'm telling them is exactly that. Oh, this is just a doctor. But in reality, like, really, they'll be looking at me and they'll look over
what does a
her,
normal
like,
person think?
Is this really is this real? Right. So sometimes it's, who's handling those expectations. And there are some patients that I'll just somewhat turn over to one of the team members and say, all right, you're guiding this patient because they seem to handle the conversations better with you than they do me. And that's okay. Sometimes as dentists, we want to think that we can handle everything and we know all things and we can explain anything to a patient. But there are times that sometimes they handle things better from a team member. They really do, because I think they can
that's a good
connect with them better.
That's a good point. Yeah. I think it's probably stresses the importance of having, like you said, everybody on the same page, everybody kind of rowing in the same direction, and then your team really understanding that process and that perspective, so then they can offer their opinion, and that's okay. It's welcomed, really, I think, a lot of times.
Yep, absolutely. So, and having those, sometimes the team members talk about these things even before surgery. I educate my patients as much as possible, but my team members also do the same thing. Part of it is, if they hear the same thing 5 different times from 5 different people, it's eventually going to set in. If they're hearing different messages from 5 different people, that's really going to confuse them. So making sure that the team is all on the same message from the very beginning, even with that first intake phone call, Kayla, who handles 90% of those calls, is giving the same message about this as I am, even post-surgery, as far as what to expect. And that's extremely important, that message across the board is just the same.
So let's talk about case acceptance for a little bit, because I think there's probably expectations there as well. And maybe it's around patients that, like you said, do their homework. Maybe it's more around you. They know they need help. They're looking for help. But a lot of times, maybe even in that first consultation, they're not there yet. What kind of percentage of patients do you see, just generally speaking, that move away from that first consult?
Oh, it's 80%. 80% of our consults just aren't there yet.
It's like they want to know a little bit, but they aren't. They're till, maybe it's fear, or
some of it's fear. I think a lot of it's financial. Plain and
they're
simple.
Just looking for. Yeah, they're looking for what it's going to cost them and what that's going to look like. Sure.
I would say, we probably close 20% of our consults as far as getting them to move forward, and the number one reason that they don't is financial. I really believe that's the number one thing. I think is that from expectations, is that really for us. So what are our expectations? We expect a patient to not know anything about implants and not be able to afford it. We come to every consult with that in mind. And then for us, it's a matter of how do we get them to move forward with that? 1, knowing about the process. 2, financially to move forward as well. And sometimes it's a matter of, every day we get somebody and go, that costs more than my car. And I said, yeah, I understand that costs more than your car, but back to expectations. This is a car that you are going to drive 10,000 times a day between chewing and speaking.
Yeah.
And you're going to drive this thing for, our goal is 20 plus years, hopefully the rest of your life, if you take care of it well, right? And so it's the expectation of the cost versus the investment. And trying to explain it to a patient sometimes is difficult. They don't get the idea of investing in
themselves.
their health, in themselves. Exactly. So
So what do you do? So for the 80% that says, thanks, have a nice day, how do you continue to engage with them to maybe help them, lower the barrier on the expectation side?
We have, again, expectations of knowing that patients aren't going to move forward. So we just know, okay, our follow with that. If somebody just doesn't move forward for whatever reason, one, they're looking for another opinion. Two, they just financially can't afford it. For us, it's always about being open with those patients, knowing that we're always going to be here for you. If you get to another consult and they give you, maybe they are less expensive, feel free to give us a call and we can talk about options, see if there's something we can do for you. We do follow up with all our patients. A lot of times they'll say if they don't move forward that day, it's usually call me back in a week, call me back in a month. I'm changing jobs. There's a million different reasons why they're not ready to move forward that day.
Right.
And it's our job to take that in and say, okay, when do you think you're going to be ready? And we really do follow up with them, either email, phone call, whatever it may be from there. So again, I think out of the 80% that don't move forward, a lot of it's just because they're just not there yet, right? I mean, I'm maybe the first office, or again, I would say the majority of them, it's financial, and there's just nothing you can do about that. It's just every patient's got to figure out a way to get in that.
It's like the baby steps that they've got to take in their head to say, okay,
exactly,
I'm either okay or not on the financial side, and then on the what I'm about to step into, I'm okay on basically jumping in on the transformation and embracing that. And that I think the testimonials that you have that articulate those make a huge difference in that impression.
And we do a good job in our consults of making sure they've seen at least one or two testimonials so they can see it from a patient, because I think they do speak volumes. They'll see a video of me as far as talking about the process, and then I come in for every consult. So I don't feel like by the time they leave, it's not a matter of them not believing in what we're telling them. It's just them either, one, financially figuring it out, or just sometimes it's in soaking in that, okay, I need all my teeth taken out and implants put in, right? Because sometimes these patients come in not knowing exactly, like, oh, okay, I need implants, and I know it's a lot of implants, but you mean you got to take out the rest of my teeth? Yeah, that's how this works. So
is that going to hurt?
Well, yeah, sometimes it's dealing with that, sometimes it's dealing with the pain of what the procedure is.
Yeah.
But it's just mentally sometimes, like, to tell somebody, hey, we need to take your limb off, we can replace it with artificial limb. Like, wait, what? They're losing a body part. And for some patients, it is a mental barrier to realize that we're taking it out of their teeth and putting in fake ones with implants. It is sometimes they just need time to process. And for us, it's back to expectations of figuring that out from the patient of, okay, what is it for this patient? Is it truly financial? Is it just the processing time, or what that may be, why they're not moving forward? So
what percentage, and this is a little kind of off topic, but what percentage of your cases that you get are referrals from other patients following treatment?
I would say we're maybe 10% from other patients.
Just out of curiosity, because
that range.
I would think that emotional connection of a reveal, or
those are the ones that they're the easy sell. I mean,
right, yeah.
They've seen their friend. They've been through. Those are the patients that know expectations are easy for them.
Yeah,
they know somebody who's been through it, and usually they paid for it, right? And unless their friend wasn't honest with them for some reason, they know, right?
Yeah.
They just know up front, like, oh, okay, it's going to cost this much. Yeah, that's what Bill told me. Oh, I'm here. So, when somebody comes in and they're a referral from another patient, it's pretty straightforward with those. It's just a matter of, sometimes for those patients, they know what the cost is. And with our financing, because we offer financing for these patients, it's getting them approved for financing. Mm-hmm. Like their buddy, maybe he has the same job. It's somebody they know from work, but their buddy is a little bit better financially off. They haven't bought 2 cars and they don't have credit card debt. So when they come in and they say, oh yeah, I know the cost. John said he did it and he's paying this much a month through Proceed. They even know the financing company.
Sure.
But then when we try to get them financing, it's not the same thing. So for sometimes it's those expectations. Now it's back to, this isn't a surgery expectation or a final expectation. It's a financial expectation,
yeah.
and how
that's
does
a big
that
part
work
of it
for them. So,
and that's a big part of it.
And then kind of, we didn't talk about this, but now expectations of, for those patients, maybe we're talking about, your friend had zirconium, but we have other options, but setting those expectations up front. This is not the zirconium. We actually have a patient right now who her friend referred her. She moved forward, but she couldn't afford the zirconium. So we have her in a PMMA. She just knows she needs a zirconium, and it's just like, she just knows, but we had to set those expectations up front. Like, it's different. It is not the zirconium. It doesn't look as pretty. It's not as strong. You have to make sure you set those up, because she thinks that she came in and got the same thing as her friend. No.
Nope.
But if you set that up front, it's easy. And she knows it because we made sure that we went over that in the very beginning. So yeah, those are the ones that easy to get those patients to move forward, but making sure you set the expectation for that specific patient.
Right. And then
outcome.
just knowing those options on the
absolutely.
final prosthesis and kind of what that entails and what that's going to look like. Yep. What did we miss on this topic, Dr. Fetch?
We talk patient expectations, but I think one thing to talk about is clinician expectations on implants, right? So I kind of do want to talk about this.
Yeah.
I love implants. As you
no
know,
kidding.
I don't know. I probably placed 15,000 implants at this point in my career, somewhere in that range.
That's awesome.
I love it. But I think physician expectations, doctor expectations of getting into the implant world is especially full arch. I'm going to focus on the full arch side of it.
Sure.
Full arch is amazing, and it can be extremely satisfying and gratifying for you. It's now my passion. As I said, I went from general dentistry into this, and I don't do general dentistry anymore, and I never want to go back. But the expectations have to realize that it is a different way of doing dentistry. You're no longer giving a patient a procedure that they want more than and can afford. When we're talking about crown and bridge, single implants, maybe those patients want it and they can afford it. Most often, you have to expect that these patients need this and can't afford it.
Right.
So you have to understand that going in, or else you're just going to give yourself a million headaches. So set your expectations on knowing that even if you're a cosmetic dentist that's been doing veneers for 20 years and all of a sudden you decide, I'm getting into the full arch implant world, good luck. Because patients come in for veneers knowing that I've got great teeth, I just want them to look better. Mm-hmm. Not, I'm a dental cripple and I need to be able to chew.
Totally different profile,
you
right?
need to change your expectations getting into the full arch world, because it's different. It really is. But once you reset your mind to, one, where to find these patients, and knowing that when you do find them, they are a different patient, that it is absolutely rewarding. Absolutely. One of the biggest complaints I get from friends that are trying to get into it is, marketing for these patients, and everybody they see that comes in has no money. And you want to think to them like, yes, the people that can afford this typically don't need this procedure. That's where you need to bring your brain back to saying that. So, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think making sure that, for me, I say this to patients all the time because, again, it's so personal for them. No matter why you're here, I'm here to help you. I don't care that you got here because you didn't use a toothbrush for your entire life and it was your fault. Maybe it wasn't your fault. You had chemo drugs that caused us to get to this point. You just had bad teeth because your parents didn't explain to this, and by the time you were 20, you already lost your teeth. There's a million reasons why somebody's in my chair. Yeah. I have to treat them all the same no matter what. And again, try to set the financial side apart from it, because in the end, they all need the same thing. So again, just trying to say, if you're getting into the full arch implant world, just change the expectations a little bit, because it is a different way of doing dentistry. They are a different patient, and it is a completely different way to treat your patient. It really is. In the end, we're treating the patients the best that we can, but just know that it's a little different. It is.
It's interesting, all the interactions I have with full arch dentists, much like yourself, and just the passion behind the treatment plan and kind of taking care of that specific patient base. It's just really impressive, because you're changing lives in a big way.
When I hear people say that, I hate saying that. I hate saying I get to change lives every day. I like to say it like this: I am just the vessel to allow a patient to change their life. Because again, you need a single implant. You're not coming into me like depressed or embarrassed. I get embarrassed. From my patients. I get patients that come in embarrassed every single day. You have to be able to work them through that. I never want to say to a patient, I change lives. I'm just allowing this patient. They made the first step. They made the realization that I'm in a place that I need to be in a better place. And I get to be a part of that journey for those patients. So for me, you're never going to hear me say I change patients' lives. That's not what I do. I am just a vessel to help them make better choices or make the improvements in their life to get to where they want to be.
I love the humility, Doc. I really do. It's just like your ability to specialize in it, though, and like where all full arch clinicians are headed now in this industry. It is, I mean, it's remarkable at how far implant dentistry has come, and let's just say in the last decade around full arch. I mean, it's wild, but it's fantastic at the same time.
Which again is back to expectations. 10 years ago, if I did a full arch on somebody, because of the materials that we had, the expectations were different. And also there weren't a million patients in All on X yet, right?
That's right.
10 years ago, you could walk down the street and people say All on X and you're like, what are you talking about? All on X? I thought it was something weird. Like, you never knew what you'd get. Nowadays, a lot of people know, and there's a lot of patients. So the expectations are getting higher and higher and higher for the ability with all the 3D stuff that we have nowadays. You really need to make sure that you're meeting those expectations because they can set high. I mean, no longer the days where every patient should be an FP3 knocking away every single bit of bone in order to just make this thing level. You need to have a different tool in your tool belt.
Right.
FP1 should be something that you need to know how to do because sometimes it's there for a patient. Again, if getting into this realm, just knowing the different expectations because patients are seeing that. It's definitely changing from what it used to be. And the more that's out there, the more the patients know as well.
It's interesting, we talk about expectations a lot, but like we could spend a whole nother hour on the expectations of a dentist stepping into it, not just from a clinical perspective.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I mean, business perspective, digital perspective, and workflow. What's the world? We could do
a whole nother, that's why I just said, what did we miss? Let's just hit on the expectations on what a dentist should be doing here, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a life-changing thing for a patient, so don't take it lightly, right? Anything we do that's life-changing, you should never take lightly in your own life, right? You're doing a life-changing experience for someone else.
Yeah.
You should make sure that you put that in your mind when you're doing this. That's why I say I don't change lives. I'm just the vessel to help people change their own lives.
No, I appreciate that wholeheartedly. Fantastic. Yep. Well, Dr. Fetch, thank you so much for the time today.
Thank you for having me.
Fun little conversation. I think we could probably revisit all these other topics again soon.
Definitely. I can talk implants all day long if you want me to.
And we can come in on National Dentist Day again or maybe another national holiday where we can come in and have a chat.
There you
go.
I
sure would like it.
Well, the next national holiday in St. Louis is called Opening Day, which is great. St. Louis Cardinals.
It's right around the corner.
It is a national holiday in St. Louis. You have to say that. So, yeah.
Awesome. Yep. Well, thanks so much for your time. Sure do appreciate it. And we will see you again soon.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Yep. Thanks.